Welcome to Smart Remarks, where the rich get richer, and that's just the way conservatives like it. So the Obama campaign unveiled a new zinger last week, Romneyhood, the idea being that Mitt Romney is the opposite of Robin Hood because Mitt wants to take from the poor and middle class and give to the rich. It was pretty good, and it had the added benefit of being true because if you think about it, that's exactly what Romney and the Republicans want to do. They're still practicing trickle down, their big economic idea being that if we give more to those who already have the most, somehow it will trickle down to the rest of us. The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center took a look at Romney's tax plan, and even though the center bent over backward to be fair to Romney, assuming, for example, that he would right out of the gate cut deductions for the wealthiest Americans, and I by no means would assume that, the Tax Policy Center could nonetheless conclude that Romney's tax plan is mathematically impossible, that it will raise the tax burden on the poor and the middle class while reducing the tax burden on America's wealthy. But what you got to understand is for Romney and the Republicans, that's not a bug. That's a feature. That is exactly what they believe. Some 30 years after the term trickle-down was coined, this is still what they practice. The philosophy is that if the wealthiest Americans we can make sure that they eat plenty of cake, there'll be plenty of crumbs falling from that table for the rest of us. So we've endured 30 years now of cutting taxes. We've reduced top marginal tax rates. We've scaled back the inheritance tax, the death tax. We've reduced capital gains taxes. And by this logic, America should be awash in jobs. And yet here we are in the midst of a jobs crisis. What in the world could have happened? It must be the liberals' fault. And of course, the answer to this is to cut taxes even further. They say the definition of insanity is doing something over and over again, expecting different results. I say that's the definition of conservatism. But I have another question here. If you see the economy as being in a crisis, and I certainly do, what is required to resolve that crisis? What must we sacrifice? And shouldn't that sacrifice be broad-based sacrifice? You know, once upon a time in America, we were all in this together, right? Ask not what your country can do, ask what you can do for your country. And already we have asked the poorest Americans to sacrifice. Here in Pennsylvania, the state has eliminated a program called General Assistance, which used to provide a couple $100 for the poorest of the poor, people struggling with homelessness or drug addiction or mental illness. Sorry, can't afford it. Checks cut off. Nope, we're not going to do it. They've had to sacrifice. We see by Romney's tax proposal that basically the middle class will be required to sacrifice, at least until those cake crumbs start trickling onto their heads. What do Romney and the Republicans believe that the wealthiest Americans should sacrifice? And if you think about it, you'll realize they don't want them to have to sacrifice at all. In fact, for America to prosper, Republicans believe that the wealthiest their sacrifice should be growing wealthier still. They will be forced to take more tax cuts. Yes, it's going to be terrible. I know it's going to be such a sacrifice, but I'll take the money. And maybe I'll create some jobs, and maybe I'll invest in commodity futures instead. After all, you've seen that drought in the Midwest driving up corn prices. Really going to spike there, right? You know, we've done this now for 30 years. It has not worked. The Romney plan is to keep doing the same thing. This idea that raising taxes even slightly on the people who have benefited most from our tax policies over the past 30 years, that this is going to kill the economy, it's insane. If we keep down this path, well, you might feel something trickling down onto your head, but I guarantee you, it won't be prosperity.